Would you please check your ideas and opinions at the door? All your philosophical and religious views, all your logic, because I say check it at the door advisedly because you can pick it up again when you go out if you feel unsafe without it. I'm not trying to argue you out of your opinions and views. I'm merely suggesting that for the sake of an experiment, you temporarily suspend them.
Hello and welcome to the Philosophical Minds podcast, an exploration of all things philosophical, alchemical, and esoteric, from the psycho-spiritual to the material-chemical nature of the all. Join me and my guests as we inquire into the liminality of mind and matter, and tend to the fertile soils of awareness and perception while facilitating an expanded consciousness from the individual to the collective. If you enjoy the show and find it of value, consider supporting and becoming a patron via the Patreon at patreon.com/philosophicalminds. A small contribution makes a big difference and definitely makes it easier for me to continue the show, although I will always do my best to keep it flowing regardless. Thank you all, and let's get into it.
Very excited to have our next guest on. He's a jack of all trades. He's a podcaster, a graphic designer, and he's got a lot of stuff going on that I'm very excited to talk to him about. Please welcome Skylar Mathis. How are you, buddy?
Good. It's great to be here. First and foremost, thank you for having me. Your shows, at least a couple of your shows, are definitely staples in my audio intake. You
don't listen to all 300 of my podcasts?
I don't. I can't possibly keep up.
That's okay. That's okay. I appreciate you listening
hat,
at all.
though. Absolutely. A little bit of broken sim every now and then, but yeah, you're a legend, definitely, and I definitely admire and I respect the pirate ship that you have built, and I definitely learn a lot from watching you sail. You're a master of your craft, I would say. So this is an honor. I appreciate you.
Keep going. I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much, Scott. That does mean a lot to me. And I there was a time where honestly I did podcasts. I really loved my podcast, and like nobody listened to the podcast. And then, the blessings are through just a bunch of crazy situations that tinfoil happened. And then it was just like, I'm so thankful and appreciative, of all the listeners and you being a fellow podcaster, you listening, that means a lot to me too. So thank you for the kind words. I greatly appreciate them. So enough about me. I want to get into you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and where our listeners can find you?
Well, like you said, I'm Sky Mathis. I'm a father, a brother, an uncle, a son, CNC operator, a graphic designer, web developer, canvas artist, podcaster, which is what I kind of enjoy most. It's like my passion project at this point, and I'm just absolutely fascinated by life and people and existence in general. People, if you're interested in this conversation after listening, you can check out my podcast. It is the Philosophical Minds podcast. I have a Patreon, and I also have the regular RSS feed that's up on all the major platforms. So, yeah, that's a little bit about myself and where people can find me.
That's awesome. And all the links are below, so please click on any of them and support Skylar for sure. I love the name of your podcast. It's a great name, and it's very cool that there's still good names out there, because there seems to be like 10,000 billion podcasts, which someone might hear that be like, oh, I want to start a podcast, but it sounds like there's too much. There is too much, but there's not enough, meaning there's room for great podcasters, and you should do it if you really want to do it. So let's get into this. It's a very interesting time in Arizona. All the election stuff going on, things going on with the government. We're going to get into a little God talk here. Do you have hope for humanity, dude? What are your thoughts on, like, I want to get into your thoughts, and then I'll explain kind of where I am after the last couple days. So, thoughts?
I definitely always try to keep hope. I don't know how one would go about living a positive existence without having hope. At least that's how I feel about it. So I'm always trying to maintain hope and, guys like you and other people out there just like speaking truth and putting their messages out there and living for positive, living to promote positivity and good things into the world is what does give me hope. So I do have hope. I think there's a lot of people that are becoming more aware of various situations, whether that's political things or just things about life in general. And so, yeah, I have hope. It's interesting in Arizona. I wish I was more dialed in to the whole political scene than I am. I am aware of, certain things with like, the election with, say, I think what it was, like Carrie Lake had some kind of shenanigans and situations where there was that Katie Hobbs chick that won out, which was kind of preposterous in my estimation, because as somebody that lives in Arizona, I drive around and I see the people that are just everywhere wanting and hoping and promoting that they're advocating for Carrie Lake, and I literally see zero signs of this Katie Hobbs chick. But yeah, and then we got another guy out here, which I've interviewed before. His name is Sheriff Lamb. Seems like he's a pretty good force for the good of things. And I think he's actually running for the Senate or something like that. But I'm not too deep into it all, but I do have hope, and I guess I do eternally. But that kind of brings me to just some things I wanted to open this up with, and I thought it'd be fun to explore this whole notion of like basically fuck the government. Like, there's like Crowder, that guy Crowder, he would have these things where he'd be like, I'm pro-life, change my mind. I put to people listening, fuck the government, change my mind.
Yeah.
Like in terms of like the whole idea of it, like in reality, the word itself, government, in terms of like the mind, the govern, and control, like mind meant. And I think it's important that we talk about the word government and what we as individuals are actually governed by, because we're not actually governed by these institutions that many people have basically given themselves over to. And I can seriously get behind the statement. I used to hear it like the one nation under God thing. That kind of hits more hard these days, as opposed to a nation of, under a group of corrupt, narcissistic sociopaths in an Oval Office. And, obviously it goes a lot deeper in terms of what's actually at play with organizations like, you and me are aware of, like Trilateral Commission or the Council on Foreign Relations or the World Economic Forum, the Bilderberg Group, the Committee of 300, all behind the scenes. And then it goes back to like these families and all of that. But locally, and most people's perceptions at least, just the idea of government and what it means, like it differs nation to nation. And I remember thinking all through like elementary school, like we should be very careful about whom or what we are pledging our allegiance to. But I think
you were thinking this what's in high school?
No, in elementary school.
In elementary school, you were
the
thinking
Pledge
like,
of Allegiance.
yeah.
It's just like, I pledge allegiance, and I'm not like, I don't want to stand up. I don't want to say this thing. Like, this is like indoctrination. I remember thinking that. And I still think there is truth to that, but now I can kind of get behind that statement.
No, that's an interesting thing. That's an interesting thing because, for me, right, the Dallas Mavericks NBA team wanted to get rid of the national anthem during the game. And I know that Mark Cuban has been on the record that he's not getting into the politics of China. We're not going to get into that, even though the NBA is fully involved in the politics of America and been on a certain side and has ignored the politics of China. Now, I've had people on here going, the information we get on China is through the military-industrial complex, and I'm not going to be someone to say that's not 100% true or 100% correct. I believe there's something to it. But, part of me goes, okay, Mark Cuban, who I tend to like, but in this instance, I think that's some real scumbag move. But I also know that playing the national anthem is a sense of indoctrination and all the stuff where they go, hey, look at this is Lieutenant Johnson, he high fives, and then all the cheerleaders are just feeling feeling them up at the, during a timeout, and they're just trying to convince like poor kids that, hey man, you could be cool like this too. We just want to put you in the meat grinder that is the international military complex that has hijacked America and turned our military into stormtroopers. So it's like, yeah, I totally get that. And then I also get where it's like there's also a sense of like everywhere else in the world, the Nazis ruined nationalism. The Nazis did. Like if you say nationalism, everyone goes, "Oh, it's the Nazis." But at the same time, like everywhere else I go in the world, people are proud of their country, where they're from, what they've done. I just was in Canada. I'll get into that at the end of the show. But, they're all proud. Like America is the only place where you're not allowed to be proud to be American. And there is some sort of this belief, and this is not that America said you can't, but the media tells you, oh, you're proud to be American, you're a nationalist, which is a slippery slope to the domestic terrorist, right, and stuff like that. So it's super, it's an interesting thing for sure. So I'm kind of in the same place you are.
Yeah, and one person I've interviewed before, they would say things like it's basically comes down to nationalists versus globalists, and I don't know. That's interesting though, and I am proud to be here among other places. I do love it, and it's basically all I know. And then definitely yes, in terms of the things that you're saying about the military industrial complex and the whole like egregore behind that, that's a whole other conversation. But kind of like whom or what are we pledging allegiance to? Like that whole thing is really interesting to me, and I think that like the whole line of one nation under God is interesting, and liberty and justice for all is important. And I think that like things like the Bill of Rights or the Articles of Confederation, the Constitution, all that stuff is cool and good, but there's an endless amount of like layers and layers of policies and legal statutes, making regulations and on, and it's basically just got to the point where it's like imploding on itself. And if we were to promote this message more, this egregore of one nation under God as basically the foundation, I do feel that that's a good thing for everyone, because I think that a nation that puts creation itself and universal laws that govern all souls at the forefront of their consideration, like if what we are governed by is God, and so long as we maintain our religious liberty and how we individually view and relate to God in our own ways, then we're basically going to have freedom, because you can't patent God. God is it's the portal to the portal to infinitum, the infinite possibilities. Like whom we are, who we are, and it's where we're from, and it's what we're in, and we're all in reality just individual like nodes. We're basically sparks firing in the mind of the all, and that's kind of how I see it. And we all have our unique perspectives on how we look out and how we see things and how we relate to that. But if we're governed by that, I think that is a good thing. So I guess that's kind of like where I was wanting to expand on that, because I do have this feeling of like there is this sense of like you don't want to be indoctrinated, and we don't really know at this point who the founders, what they were going for, what they were trying to input into our realities or set up, and maybe it was hijacked, maybe it was corrupted. Like we're just in this place of trying to refigure everything out, but I think we can extract from it the things that are important, and that's I think one of them. So I thought it would be worthy to talk about.
No, I love it, and I agree with you. It's we're in a spiritual war right now, and it's very interesting, and both sides are really waging war on us and our humanities, and wanting to basically psychologically annihilate us and destroy us. And that includes the right, the very far right, and they're pushing of organized religion on people. Now, I'm not anti any religion. I'm anti-religious zealous who push their interpretation of things. Most people's interpretation of things are regurgitations of what other people told them. And the more like, I'm a very spiritual man. It's like I'm really into this thing where it's like, I'm really starting to understand that there's a difference between simple and easy, spirituality and religion, intelligence versus smarts, culture versus nature, culture versus heritage. And when we get down to like spirituality versus religion, and like, the more spiritual you get, like, I had this crazy day today, right? I had this crazy day. I had to fly from Toronto.
Oh,
And
wow.
every moment of this trip, I was pressed. Like, I was pressed and I was pushed to not go nuts. Okay. And I have grown spiritual, and I went to a recovery meeting today, and I forgot to talk about this, but I was pushed to the point where I was like, this system that they have us go through right now is not being done for efficiency, but at the highest levels is being done to raise our anxiety and get us angry and depressed. And these airlines operate in a way that is meant to fleece you of your money and get you upset. So and raise your anxiety. So at every moment I had to go, let it go, let it go. And that all comes from spirituality and just being closer to God, and every day writing in my journal, my manifest list, my goals for life, let it go, let it go, let it go.
Yes.
And that is a spiritual thing. And
Yeah.
so we have this thing where we got this cultural Marxist, which is no God coming after us. And then we have this religious right, which is organized religion coming at us with a black and white view of everything, which is either you're with us or you're against us.
Absolutely.
Telling us, preaching to us a book, and this is not anti-God or anti-Christian or even anti-Bible, but it's like you're preaching a you're preaching to us interpretations of a book that came 400 years after the guy that you follow lived. It's like there's a lot of questions about and who put that together and all that. And again, I love Jesus. I'm cool with Jesus. I respect Jesus. I respect his teachings. But there's a lot of like this anti this and anti that extremists where to me it's like live and let live. As long as you're not going after people and hurting people, in particular children, what you do with consenting adults is not my business. But we'll never be able to have this moment of peace because the extremes on both sides love to fucking fuck around and find out,
Yes. Exactly. I think you're totally on the ball about it, and I'm I'm actually really interested in how this plays out. Like, we got guys like Shapiro or Jordan Peterson and all of them out there doing their thing, and they don't all necessarily see things the same way. So I am curious how that all plays out with, what they've got going on with their own little like media thing right now, and how the public responds to that, because I think there is value in it, but I mean, there is also probably narrative spinning in it as well. And but yeah, that's what I love about you, is that you speak to this sort of thing all the time. Like, you don't pick sides. You're not just pandering to one side or the other for attention or accolades or anything like that. You're just basically seeing things and calling them like you see them, and speaking your truth. And it's like, yeah, because like any man created institutions or systems that claim governance over any incarnate soul on earth is basically like a parasitic mind virus that essentially attacks and tries to latch onto us at the moment of birth, like authenticating our existence as if we are dependent on the stamps of approval from an outside entity to validate our existence or something. Yet it's become so normalized, and we're somehow complacent with it all. And we've gotten to where we're in the habit of requesting permissions and being granted licenses and approvals from the system of hollow entities that want to accumulate and manipulate and monetize humanity in like every possible way. And governments of any kind outside of ourselves and our God conceptions are false idols, in my opinion. Like Christians are worried about people worshiping false idols of things like money or sex or the ego. How about these governments? They promote all that shit. They're just out of control. You know, because as far as I'm concerned, we're all one. We're all from the same source. I think even materialists could agree that in terms of the matter or substance alone that composes our physical makeup, our physical bodies, our vessels, they're composed of the same chemical compounds. We all have blood in our veins. We all have collagen in our skin. We all have bones, and we're all made up of proteins and DNA and fats and carbohydrates. Even materialists should be able to observe biology and acknowledge this fact that we're all from the same thing, regardless of what that thing is. So to them, I would say it's like it's like where did the chemicals come from that made us? The earth, maybe, the planets, the stardust. Okay, so what made that shit? Call it the Big Bang, call it whatever you will. The word made manifest, the ohm, but basically, first and foremost, let's consult some ancient wisdom and some universal laws or principles. All things are mental first. All is mind. First things first, in the order of creation, it starts with thought. It was thought. It was an idea, a potent creation. It's a potent, creative, ever evolving, ever present thought, and we are of it, and we are in it, and that's one thing that we can all for certain agree upon. I think, at least, I think we should be able to. So,
Well,
yeah.
I would agree with you on all of it. And, there is here's the whole thing. I think they're losing. I think you talk about manifest, and I know I've talked about this a lot lately, but like so much of what is going on is just them trying to manifest us to agree to it. That's it. Like these stories now are like they are trying to tell us that there's already boots on the ground in the Ukraine. It's I mean, why we're there. We might as well finish it up. Nobody wants to go to Ukraine. Nobody thinks it's a good idea. But this is something I wanted to get into at the beginning with you. So I go to Toronto, right? And I'm in this very small theater. I do 6 shows. I sell 5 of them out. We added a 6th show later. I'm going to ask you, what is your opinion of what is going on in Canada right now? Do you have any opinion?
It's gonna be from a place of mostly ignorance. Like I have a couple friends in Canada, and there's different parts of Canada, and different parts are more or less better than others. But I mean, I look at the shit I see with Trudeau, and that dude is a fucking psychopath. Like I don't know how else to put it. Like I can't believe this guy is up there doing what he's doing. Like we have, I mean, in our instance, basically the dude with Alzheimer's that is allegedly in charge of our country, whatever, which we know he's not. He's basically just like a puppet. But at least in his instance, there's the excuse of the mental, like he's getting old thing. But Trudeau is not getting old. He's a young guy, and he, in my opinion, has the information and the wisdom to make the right choices and do the right thing, and he's not. And when I see a person like that, that's the scariest person you can get, because you know that he has the intellect and the ability to differentiate right from wrong. At least, I mean, but I guess that's when it comes down to like narcissism and sociopathy and basically, like, I guess that's where you can get into things like what's a demon and
I want to get into that. But what I
yeah.
want to, obviously I'm joking here, but it's like this joke. It's this belief that Canada is becoming China. right? And to the point where you're like, oh, you guys in these Uyghur camps, right? Do they have Canadians in Uyghur camps and stuff like that? Like, there's this notion that Canada is in this free fall into communism, right? Well, I land in Toronto and it's nothing but happy people doing happy stuff, running around, living the best life. And I'll tell you something about Toronto. To me, Toronto is what humanity is capable of. It's multi-ethnic, everybody's happy, the chicks are hot. And the reason I bring that up is because so much of like our perception right now is through manipulation, which is black magic. To me, propaganda is black magic. And I mean, you would think Canada is like on the verge of just some fucking Mao Zedong 100 million slaughter going on, you know, the way we portray everything up there. And maybe Trudeau plays it smart where he leaves Toronto alone because that's like a fifth of their population. So if they're happy, then you just pound the rest of it. But based on being up there, I'm not saying it's perfect, but my view of Canada is not what I experience up there.
Wow.
And then I tell you, if I go to these other places, right, it's the same thing. I go here, it's like, oh, when people are like, oh my God, I hear LA's the worst ever. I'm like, I mean, outside the comedy being full of stupid people, it's really not that bad, right?
Yeah.
But all the stuff I see on the news makes me think we're on the edge. And, you know, it's like that's and a great example, and I'd love to get your opinion on this. I went to Portland during the height of the Antifa riots. So I was excited to go see some Antifa riots, right? I just wanted to go watch. And I land there, and there's these guys who had a podcast. I don't know if they're still doing it, called Good Morning Jonestown. And they were doing time on my show. I go, man, what are these riots like? They're like, we don't know. We haven't seen one. I go, how's that possible? I've seen the news. Like, this city's burning. They're like, we haven't seen one. So I'm like, what? So we drive around. We go looking for an Antifa riot. Like, we want to go see one in like a Bigfoot. It's at this, like, we're Bigfoot hunting. So we find this tiny park with like 100 people, and you're like, oh, that's it? And I literally walked into the middle of it and took some pictures. I like, you know, and I realized it's all bullshit.
That's fascinating. See that, and I think that's awesome because, you know, me just giving my little iteration of my take on it and then hearing you as somebody that's gone there and firsthand experienced it. That's what's awesome about and important also about, you know, things like podcasting and people being able to speak their own true experience, because there's obviously some forces in place with the media and our algorithms and things that are feeding us information and stuff, because there's obviously like a perception, like an intervening perception operation taking place, and probably multiple of them, and it's giving people false illusions of what's happening in reality, and for whatever reasons, for clicks, for maybe to try to gain traction with sociological or political movements. All of the above could be possible. So I think that's awesome that you had luckily a good experience there.
Well, it's just interesting that, like, once again, well, once again, the perception that is being portrayed to me on the social media is not what I'm experiencing boots on the ground.
Yeah.
So, again, I haven't been to China in a long time, but the whole perception is China, if you speak out, you go to jail. So I'm like, I'm a little nervous, right? So I go there, and there's a guy after me that's super funny out of New York. He cancels his gig because he doesn't want, his excuse is, I don't want to go to jail. And you're like, I'm there why this is happening. I'm like, that is the farthest from the truth. That they ask you not to do a couple things, like they don't want you to talk about Japan and China because Japan whooped China's ass, and then they don't want you to talk about the government. I get that, okay, but I mean, dude, if you're an expat there, they let you pretty much do whatever the fuck you want. It's like, again, it's like it's getting into this demon shit you want to talk about. This is black magic.
Yeah, I remember a while back listening to like Theo Vaughn. He was talking about when he went to China and he was working there, and he just had nothing but good things to say about it. And he is Theo Vaughn, but still, it seemed like he had a great experience, and it wasn't nearly as bad as people talk about or whatever. But I think that's like when it comes to podcasting, like there's so many good things about podcasting and being able to be public speakers and be people that are trying to discern the truth and then put out versions of what they're experiencing in their realities, because it helps kind of inform people in a way that's combating this whole whatever it is, this narrative control thing that's in place. And I'm sure that that's taking place in podcasts as well. But I mean, we got to do what we got to do is if we're people that want to stand for truth, at least. And there's like a resonating thing too with certain individuals that like they have a certain vibration like in their voice that rings true. And whether they're saying things that are factual or not, it's like you can tell when somebody's saying something in a certain way that they're giving their truthful input about whatever their opinions are. At least I feel that way. And you could tell when somebody has the primary aim of at least arriving at truth. And I think guys like you, guys like me, a lot of people we're associated with at least are trying to aim for truth. And that's what I'm drawn to, and that's what I hope to exemplify. Like personally, you listen to Joe Rogan and you hear a particular strain of truth. You yourself, you have a particular strain of truth. Like guy Duncan Trussell, Mark Steves, Greg Carlwood. Not to say that everything you say or I say is gospel, and it's not always 100%, but there's a common aim of like trying to get to important messages of truth that are like things that would be able to reveal to people things that are important understandings about reality. And kind of reminds me of something I wanted to ask you about, because there was a comment that I think you said it to Tom Segura, if I remember correctly, because he mentioned it on Joe Rogan. He'd mentioned that you and him had some kind of class together when he came out to LA, and you kind of got him motivated about stand-up, and it was a moment where you basically were like encouraging him, and you said something like, you got to get out there and fight crime. And I don't know exactly how you meant it, but I could tell you how I took it because it inspired me. But maybe you could reply to that. Like, what did you mean by that? Or, yeah, I'm curious.
Well, it's very interesting because as a young man, I was just like, I'm a crime fighter, and obviously, but then, now I realize that like we as the jesters, the comedians, have to take truth to the people. Now, a lot of my friends who I love with all my heart don't want to dive too deep into what is going on.
If anyone out there is interested in purchasing any elixirs, spagyrics, alchemical formulations of any kind, do go and check out medicinebuddhalabs.com. And stay tuned because Taylor's actually in the midst of producing a liquid supplement containing a spagyric tincture of ashwagandha and shilajit. The shilajit's lab-tested Siberian shilajit. It's going to be roughly 25 grams per bottle, and it'll be sold at basically 15 to 20% under what the market is currently charging for shilajit. So definitely stay tuned for that, and as always, enter PM Podcast at checkout for 10% off. Also, Potable Gold are unpotable. If you're looking for a solid source, Benjamin Terrell, the Temple of Mercury, is the man. He's my personal go-to, and I can attest to the quality. TheTempleofMercury.com. PhiloCast at checkout for 15% off. Additionally, if you want an extensive variety of alchemical offerings, check out euchaotiques.com. EAUXCHAOTIQUES.com. Go on there, check out the shop. There's tinctures, elixirs, essences, mushroom blends and extracts, crystal and mineral, metallics, ends tinctures, resins, all kinds of goodness. So do go check that out. If there's something you like, PhiloPod at checkout for 15% off of your order.
And it's very interesting to me because I'm in this place where it's like I've gone on this weird journey, and I ask myself, have I arrived in the same place that these people who don't give a fuck? Are we in the same place, but we're there for different reasons, right? We're like, they don't know what's going on, and I'm realizing everything's a lie, right? But are we standing right next to each other? And if you're asking me, where I am is more important, but is it? I mean, like, it's just this real interesting thing because a lot of my friends, for many different reasons, some of them are doing very well in Hollywood and don't want to rock the boat. Some of them don't believe it. And some of them don't want to get political because of, they just want to be comedians. And I love them all and I respect all them.
Yeah.
But I go, hey man, there's like a real, there's a chance this thing falls off the cliff if we don't push back enough. But then I also think we're winning, so it may never push off the cliff. So at the end of the day, they'll be like, see, nothing happened. I'm like, well, you don't know the work that just... Do you remember those? I don't know if you might be too young for this. There used to be a commercial where there was this baby, and this dog was in charge of protecting this baby. And the baby would always get in trouble, and the dog's whole job was to save the baby from getting in trouble. But the baby never knew how much trouble it was in because the dog was always saving it from anything that was about to happen. Like, sometimes I think that's what we do.
That's hilarious. No, I don't remember that commercial, but it's a beautiful...
No, it's a cartoon. It was a cartoon.
Oh, okay.
But it's like, that's why I feel like we're like, this whole thing with the Restrict Act, they are just trying to manifest us giving up and just giving them our all the rest of our personal freedoms, even though I 100% believe they're already doing everything that they're telling. They just want to get rid of the legalese of it that could cost them their jobs, right? But at the end of the day, I really do believe they're already doing everything that they're trying to get in this act. And but they're trying to manifest us letting them do it.
Like many of these acts, and I would be curious actually to hear. I'm not too familiar with that Restrict Act, so maybe we can go into that. But I don't know if I felt this way initially or not, maybe a little bit, but kind of in regards to podcasting, I think what it's become is, at least I feel this way, it's become an opportunity to do positive damage, and it feels good to my soul, like battling the quote unquote demons of the ether and at least trying to keep them at bay. So if I'm gonna define like a demon in this sense or whatever, I would say something along the lines of like the idea of people becoming possessed by idea seeds that sprout and take root and are nurtured by the people and evolved. And when a multitude becomes possessed, we have what we would call an egregore. I'm sure you've heard that term, or a group soul, if you will. And there's good ones and bad ones, and then there's also angelic entities behind some of these, perhaps as good ones. And so I would say that something that you often allude to when people criticize bigger people out there like Rogan, for instance, he's in a whole other league. He's fighting giant monsters, like maybe like big pharma and shit like that or something. And we can't always expect everyone to know everything that we know in regards to the monsters or the demons that we choose to fight or the passions that we gravitate towards. Someone like Crow 777, He's fighting the monsters that threaten sovereignty or natural law. He's all about that stuff a lot of the time. A lot of other things too. He has a passion that you can hear in his voice. You yourself, you're very skilled at fighting the monsters of the demon that threaten free speech and censorship, and you're armed with your experience of your humor, and you're, someone like Graham Hancock. He's battling against the forces of narrative control within the
Yeah,
archaeological
great point.
realm of things, and there's all these different things and all that we all come up against, and our goals are like to pierce through the walls of this deception and these deceptive entities that aim to block us from uh piercing the veils of truth. And for me, I guess I'm kind of aimed and with my podcast at slaying the monsters of ideological divisiveness or judgments and false perceptions around things like the occult and alchemy. These are just little examples, and there's a lot of crossover with all these different podcasters or people that maybe we might be familiar with in regards to what we listen to. But yeah,
No, I
speaking,
agree with you, man. And
yeah,
the occult discussion is like a really crazy one because I think there is a lot of misperception of a lot of things in the universe that people do not understand. And because the demons out there, the dark entities, the dark magic, the dark occult magic, um, they want to make everything what is up is really down. They want to invert everything. So let's take like the Nazi swastika. That is the universal symbol. That is a Hindu symbol for peace. The pedophile symbol, which is the swirl, which is seen as a swirl, is now it was the symbol for the universe, and this is being done on purpose. So when you try to point these out, what people have now done is they are like Bathman. If you talk to people like Ian Ferguson from White Lotus of Light, he'll tell you that that is a entity that is neither good nor bad. It's like a gun, right? It's like
totally.
a gun could be used to murder somebody. A gun could be used to protect yourself. It is an amplifier, Bathman. But the way it's been portrayed is that it's this evil entity. Like they made us think every entity out there is the devil. When in reality, there's Moloch, Kronos, who are the same person,
Yeah.
and they don't even understand that.
Yeah, and you're one of the few people that are out there saying these things, and there are a few people that are out there saying these things because of the fact that they don't want to get attacked for speaking on it. Like when you talk about the swastika and you say that it was originally a symbol of whatever. I think there's like Tibetan uh relics and things along these
Yeah,
lines.
Hinduism.
Hindu, yeah. And
There's synagogues that have giant swastikas in them.
yeah, and it's important to like draw attention to that, and it acts as a way to preserve truth as far as you can. Because if you're not going to do it, or if people aren't going to do it, then it just gets lost. So I'm somebody that's interested in learning about and promoting anything that revolves around promoting the truths that are like the things that actually represent reality, or that did at one time represent, like with symbols, for example, like you're saying with the Baphomet symbol, these spirals, all this stuff. It's like everything being taken, hijacked, perverted, distorted, and it's important to draw attention and get to the truth of these things so that people can be aware and they don't judge them and then misinterpret them when they shouldn't. And then you mentioned Ian Ferguson. He's awesome. I've interviewed him as well, and I love that he breaks these things down in a pretty cool and comprehensive way. And he talks about like Moloch and the whole Luciferian thing. And I like to even take it beyond that, and instead of using the names of the things, use things that represent what those things are. Like when we talk about Moloch, there could be a few different associations of what Moloch is. Like the Molochian, what represents something that is Molochian or Ahrimanic, because Ahriman or Ahrimanic impulses are similar to Moloch or Molochian impulses. And what is that? It's like it's like the god of materialism, or it's like this idea of materialistic worship and solidification and density, and there's all these associations, and I like to talk about that because it gets more down to the foundational root of what they are, and then people don't get so confused. And then when we talk about like Luciferianism or like ultimate liberation, to the point where it's just a complete open free for all or whatever, like, you know, there's a balance, and I like that Ian Ferguson talks about this balance too. And I think that the balancing point is what I've come to understand, at least through different researchers and people throughout history, what I would call like the Christ impulse, or the root of what it means to be in touch with the Christos. And that's like the balance, that's the middle way. Like you don't want to be too far to one side or the other of anything.
What's
like,
that called? The Christos?
Christos, the Christ. It's the whole idea behind the way and the truth, and I think that that's the thing that's being aimed at. Like if we're going to look out at the world and look at all these different divisive things, and we have polarity, and we have the left and the right and the black and white and all this stuff, obviously it never helps to go to be on one end of the spectrum or another end of the spectrum.
Bro. There's a book right now called The Mystery of the Christos.
Okay.
And it's $125.
Wow.
Which makes you go, they don't want you reading this book.
Yeah. So, like, I think of it like it's the whole idea of the middle way, or the middle path, moderation, being balanced, not like thinking and considering both sides, but not giving into one side or the other. And that's what I think of when I think of Christ. And people might think differently than me, but if I think about what it comes down to, I think a lot of it represents that, and I think it's an important message to put out there and promote.
Super interesting, dude.
And like you know, you were talking about the whole idea and the perceptions of the occult, and why that's important to me is because I am interested in occult subject matters, and, you know, hidden subject matters, or things that we don't often get exposed to. Like I love that stuff, and I think a lot of people do. Obviously, there's so many podcasts these days talking about it, and some people will give their negative perceptions on it, and some people will give more positive perceptions. But I'm just interested in what exists, and like what constitutes reality. And yeah, I think we've both interviewed and talked to guys like Jay Dyer, which I respect. I love him. I like the things that he represents, because it seems like ultimately he promotes a message against a lot of these negative influences. But when it comes to things like the occult, I feel like he's a little judgmental. And like I said, all due respect, guys like Isaac Weishaupt, love Isaac Weishaupt, love listening to his stuff. He talks about a lot of important stuff. Maybe he's coming around to a deeper understanding at this point. But I think that like that's kind of one of my goals to what I'm doing with my podcast, and that's why I interview a lot of these people in these different organizations.
I love it, dude. I love it. I love that you're doing that. I think that's great. And I think if you go too hard one way, like I always find it very interesting, and this was very illuminated during the COVID vaccine thing, where you had people who would rally against government on many different fronts, but then openly scorn anybody who questioned vaccines. It was a very weird thing to watch. And there was a lot of guys from the left that were anti-government, anti-military industrial complex, anti-war, but pro-vaccine. and didn't quite understand that all the people pushing all the war and all that stuff were the same people pushing this vaccine and all that stuff. So for my whole thing is this, is that if you question one thing, you question everything. And if you're ever like, this is 100% true, I think you've lost. I think questioning everything is tiring to a lot of people, but that's how it starts. What you should always do is that when you begin your journey, it gets very exhausting. But then if you train yourself to always be in a skeptical place, not like a nasty place where fuck everyone, but going, okay, okay, all right, we'll wait and see. Like you're always in karate stance, right?
Yes.
You're always like, okay, we'll see. I'm gonna not buy into this. I'm not gonna deep throat what you're saying right now. I'm gonna take my time and see how it plays out. But I always have a spiritual skeptic view of everything.
Yes.
All the time, and I think that's very important. Hey,
Yes.
Sky,
Yeah.
I got a jam right now because I got another call,
Awesome.
another phone. You crushed. Thank you for coming on. One more time, tell them where they can find you.
Philosophical Mind podcast. Check it out. Patreon, Instagram, RSS feed on all the platforms. And yep, thank you everybody for listening. Appreciate you, Sam. Thank you again.
Well, I loved it. We'll definitely get you on the big show. We'll have a big conversation on there. We'll figure out what the best thing to talk about that is, and we'll make that happen for sure. I'd love to do that. And you crush it. Please make sure to email me any links you want in the description. Hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you guys are coming on this journey with me where we start to really go, what is real, what is not real, not in a place where we start to drift into the abyss of insanity, but we start to really ground in that, how much of this is actually affecting my life, and how much am I going to run like Chicken Little, or am I just going to sit back and weather the storm? So I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. It's a wonderful conversation, and we will do it again soon. Thank you guys so much. Talk to you. Take care, and good night.